and welcome to the Flame and Fiber podcast. My name is Barbara. You can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Diva S. And I'd like to say hello and welcome. Thank you so much for checking out my podcast. Welcome to any new viewers and welcome back. Thank you so much for coming back, those of you who've watched before. I really appreciate it. I haven't podcasted in a while. I was on a huge, amazing trip, which I will tell you about, which is why this is probably a long podcast. But I will start with my knitting for those of you who are only here for the knitting and not at all interested in the trip, although it was an amazing trip. We've been back about a week, and I was toast for, last night was the first night I went to bed at a normal hour for the East Coast of the United States and got up at a reasonable hour. When we came back, I couldn't stay awake past 8:30 and I was getting up at 4. So I'm glad to be a little bit on my own, on my regular schedule. But anyway, I'm home and I'm back, and I hope everyone in the United States had a lovely Thanksgiving. Today is Tuesday, November 28th. I know that because I just looked it up. And I'm just realizing my glasses are incredibly dirty and I will need to clean them. But these are my, in theory, glare-free glasses, so it shouldn't be too bad. I had some trouble with my lighting, so I'm doing this straight from the window and nothing else. So I hope the lighting works out. Oh, I forgot. I have an incredible scratch on this. These glasses were one of the first victims of Pearl's entry into our lives, and while she was still chewing up things, and I say that like she's not still chewing up things. She is. Dennis had to rescue some yarn from her today. She likes yarn, unfortunately. I guess, she smells like sheep. She's a German Shepherd. Having my coffee. It's still morning for a few minutes, and I'm having my coffee in my David's tea mug. There's some lighting issues there. Maybe that's better. It changes. You can see this sheep is a little black on top because the coffee doesn't go up to there. So the sheep are all black sheep until I put hot coffee in. So this is a fun mug, and it's a good size for my coffee maker, which I have talked about before. So let's start with the knitting. When last we spoke, I was working on a worsted boxy with the yarn that I had gotten from Mane. Thank you so much. As a gift. And when I came home, I continued to work on it. So I actually, because it was, I was ready to be a stockinette zombie, as they say. So this is how far I am. This is a beautiful color, but it's going to be a sweater that shows up when I wear it. I'm not going to be hiding in the background, but I really love, and the yarn is so delicious. I have a second color that I think I'm going to be incorporating. This is Duin. And this is a yarn from Chile, and so I'm so excited. Dennis and I have decided our next trip will be to Chile, so I'm hoping to meet Maria, who goes, I think, by Mani, and she's in Santiago, so we're going to spend a couple days in Santiago before we are going with the same company. We go with Grand Circle or Overseas Adventure Travel. They're sister companies. But we will be going to Santiago for a couple of days before our tour starts. So I'm hoping to hook up with a few people. Connie from Connie Knits, I'm coming to Santiago. So anyway, I kept working on this, and I worked on this till I got to 19 inches, which is what the pattern says. And I'm trying to decide if I want to, trying to get the light right here. That's better. That's the color. Trying to decide if I want to make it a little bit longer. And trying to decide if I want to be brave and see if I can get it all out of the mint color. because this is where I am in theory. And I have most of 2 balls left. And I don't know if I can get the tiny little sleeves and the little part of the front and back. But I don't know if this is to scale either. Because if this is to scale, I might be able to do it. But if it's not... Anyway, my plan originally was, my assumption was that I didn't have enough yarn in this color. And she had given me, I think I have 3 of the gray. So I think I'll just do what my original plan was. And I think I will knit maybe 1 more inch on the body so that it's a little bit longer. And then I will do the sleeves, the top part across here, which has some garter detail, I think, and the sleeves out of the gray. And I think that's going to be beautiful. It'll be like a color block sweater. This yarn is so fun to knit. So I did not take this on my trip with me. So I've probably, well, I had to tear some of it back. I don't know if I got the yarn dirty or if there was something at the factory. I'm not sure, but there, after I looked at it last time, there were some stripes in it from that looked like grease or something. So I had to tear back, and I took that yarn out and I re-knit it because it would have shown too much, and I wasn't confident that I would be able to get it out. Now I have the yarn and I'm going to wash it and see if I can get it out. But anyway, so I did, I don't know, 7 or 8 inches since I got back. But I stopped when I had to think because I was too fried to think. I had picked it up originally because it was just stocking it, knitting around, and that was all I had in me. So, oh, look at me, I'm all fuzzy now. So I worked on this. This is the Worsted Boxy by Joji Locatelli. And this is going to be a gorgeous, squishy, cuddly, kind of blanket-like sweater. And that's going to be gorgeous. And that yarn is so nice. Really soft. So, but it was so big, I couldn't take that on my trip. So I took my gift knitting on my trip. And so oops. I have my stuff piled right in front of my camera. My phone. So my spoiler alert, if my nieces are watching this, don't watch. You're going to see your Christmas present. They don't watch. Last year at Christmas, when I gave my dad a hat, they said, "Oh, I want a hat." And I said, "Oh, okay, what color?" Black. So that was kind of a drag, but I bought that beautiful black yarn. Let's see. From the Periwinkle Sheep Company at Rhinebeck, and I cannot find the tag any longer, in the Witch's Cauldron colorway. So that turned out to be quite a nice black. That's it. Because it's got a little bit of interest going on, but it was hard to knit. My sister had given me that light that went around your neck. I used it. I took it on the trip and I used it. So I ended up making 2 hats. These are both the Sockhead hat by Kelly McClure. And they're both out of the Witch's Cauldron colorway in the Periwinkle Sheep fingering. And these are fun. I had 2 skeins of that. I wasn't sure how much it used. And in the end, of my trip, I ran out of things to knit. So with the leftovers, I started one for myself. Now, I'll tell you the truth. I only knit it because I didn't have anything else to knit, because I do not really want to knit a 3rd black sockhead hat. Although I think a black sockhead hat is like the perfect thing to have in a gift pile because, some people. So I have it started. I'm pretty sure I have enough yarn left to make a 3rd one from the 2 skeins. And I thought about making doing something with minis or something to make it a little more colorful. But if I do that, I don't really want a black, totally 4-inch black ribbed front top of the hat. So anyway, I think I'll just leave this somewhere, you know, to be picked up when I have good light and nothing else to do. And eventually I'll have a hat for myself or for a gift, because it's generic and the yarn is nice. This yarn is really nice. So anyway, I just started it because I ran out of yarn. I was like, couldn't believe it. But I did a lot of knitting. We had plenty of time, you know, we had long airplane rides and we had time to knit. So I knit that. I also knit my granddaughter's hats. I haven't put the pom-pom head on it yet, but this was going to be for Isabel because light blue is her favorite color. And as you can see, the bear is light blue. Trying to find a good place to show the colors. There you go. And that's why I bought this one, because Isabel's favorite color is light blue. I bought this one for Sammy, and I made this one smaller because Sammy's young. She's only a year, but I think I made it too small, so I'm gonna undo the decreases and make this bigger. And this one is so adorable. It's a little lion. So I got this one originally for Sammy. But my dilemma is, when I saw the kids at Thanksgiving, Isabel was wearing a pink and orange kind of swirly disco jacket. And this hat would be so perfect with her jacket. So I wonder how she would feel if I gave her a lion and a cute hat and a lion, and Sammy got her favorite color hat. I don't know. I'll have to talk to her mother. See what I think. But these hats, I got this yarn. They're like little kits at the knitting shop in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, on the Outer Banks, that we go to every year when we're there in September. And so I got these two, and they're so cute. They knit it up really, really fast, and they're going to be adorable. And those I'm giving the girls for Christmas. I'm going to be knitting them other things too, I'm sure. And the other thing I knit while I was gone that isn't quite finished, but maybe will be gone the next time I podcast, is my brother's stepson, my nephew, Riley, had a little boy named Wyatt while I was on my trip. But I knew he was coming. He was due around Thanksgiving. He came the 7th, so he was like 2 weeks early. So this is hard to show, but this is an antler cardigan. I love Tin Can Knits. Their patterns go from 0 to, I don't know, 4X or something. So they have every size you can imagine. So I had a little interest in the antler cardigan for myself, and I thought, oh, well, I'll get it and make Wyatt an antler cardigan. And it was a lot of fun. So the only thing I have left to do is weave in the ends and do the underarms, graft the underarms, and put on the buttons, and it will be done. And I forgot to look up the yarn for this. I found it. Okay. This is Encore Color Spun, knitted worsted weight, and it is 75% acrylic, 25% wool, but it can be dried in the dryer. It feels lovely. And when you have a new baby, man, you do not want to worry about it. So this is Plymouth Encore. And the color is maybe Drifting, 7827. Anyway, I was pretty happy with it. It was fun to knit the antler part. I may make myself an antler cardigan at some point, but I might make one for Isabel or Sammy too at some point. So I just have a little bit to go, but I got a lot of ends. But it turned out really cute. He won't be able to wear it for a little while. He's a little guy. He came early. And I also made a hat. Now there is an antler cardigan hat pattern, which I did not buy. So I took the pattern of the antler cardigan and I tried to make it into a hat. And I will send this, whether they'll be able to use it or not, I don't know. It feels like when I try to open it wide, where I ended the pattern seems a little tight. It may be that I was doing decreases there. I don't know, and it's a little pointy, but I'll probably put a little pom-pom on top of that just to make the point of the hat have a point or have a purpose. So anyway, but I'm sure the antler hat is would look better than this, but I thought it turned out cute. I think they'll like it. I'll put a pom-pom on it. If he wears it, he wears it. If he doesn't wear it, he doesn't wear it. The real gift will be the sweater, but I thought that would be cute. So this is my gift for my nephew's baby. When I went to visit my parents this weekend, my sister was up for Thanksgiving, and since we had Thanksgiving here and they had Thanksgiving there, I hadn't seen her. So I went up and I told my parent, I showed them the sweater. I said, I'm making it for Riley's baby Wyatt. And they're like, Riley had a baby. My brother never called my parents. They announced it on Facebook. My parents aren't on Facebook. They are now. My father was talking to his brother while we were gone, and he was just, saying what the kids were up to. Oh, and Barb's in Egypt, and Uncle Bob says, oh, I know, I've been looking at her pictures on Facebook. My dad's like, what? So I've got my parents on Facebook this weekend while I was there, so now they'll get the announcement when the babies are born and see the pictures before I get there, but I did show them the pictures. So anyway, so that was my knitting while I was on my trip. I made 5 hats, 2 of them socket hats, and a baby sweater. So I did a lot of knitting, and then I started the other hat. While we were away, I did visit one yarn shop, but I didn't end up buying any yarn there. I bought a needle and I bought some buttons, but I didn't buy any yarn, and I was sorry when I got to the end of the trip and I had used up all my yarn. All my projects. So I have the start of a black sockhead hat that I might finish someday. It would be good if I did. It's just stockinette. I'm at the stockinette part. I finished the ribbing and I'm at the stockinette part. So why not? Just keep going. And, because there are times when you just can't think. Just can't think. So the other thing I knit besides when I could start to think, I was started to think about Christmas presents. Christy, Allison, Jason, if you are watching this, which you're not, go away, because spoiler alert. So since we retired, we have cut way back on, we've changed the nature of the Christmas presents that we give to the kids. And before we retired, we had cut our Christmas list way, way, way down. The nieces get presents. I guess Wyatt will get a present. He's getting a sweater. That's going to be his Christmas present. But my parents decided they didn't want to do exchange presents anymore. We've never exchanged with Dennis's side of the family. And my friends and I, we've just stopped exchanging gifts because we don't need anything. And so what we're doing is, now that we're retired, we've really went low-key with the gifts. And you might have seen my podcast last year because I did my Christmas knitting. I made hats and slippers and things like that. So this year I decided that I want to do even less knitting, gift knitting. I want to do personal knitting. I am all about the sweaters these days. And I had mislaid one of my fingerless mitts, and I only have ever knit myself one pair of anything for my hands, and it was fingerless mitts. And I only have a couple hats, so I want to knit myself some hats. And I have a lot of knitting I want to do for myself. And there's some knitting I want to do for my house too. I wanna knit a table runner. I started that linen one because I was bored one day, and I'm not going to finish that. I have to find that and frog it and whatever. But I do want to find a really nice table runner pattern so that I can knit that. But anyway, I do want to give handmade gifts for Christmas. And so this year, Dennis this past year has become the king of the microbe. He is, if it takes a microbe to make it, he's all about it. He's making wine, he's making vinegar, he's making yogurt and cheese, he's making kombucha, he's making kefir, he's making, oh, I'm sure there's something else, but I'm not remembering. So anyway, it turns out his wine is pretty good, which was a big relief to me because I was a little nervous. You know, I'm not a wine snob, but I don't like to drink wine that I don't like. So I was really glad to discover that I like Dennis's wine. So that's nice. So he's going to be giving away wine. And my father, many years ago, had a winery in central Pennsylvania, outside of State College. And he had that winery for 20 years, I think. And after they closed, he ended up with wine, you know, a few cases of red wine in his basement that they never drank. And then it got too old because his wines, you know, it's not like fine French wines that can last hundreds of years. It got too old. But Dennis is trying to make vinegar out of this wine. And he's, you know, we'll see how it tastes when the time comes. But if the time comes, that's going to be his gift to my parents, is vinegar made out of their wine vinegar. And that'll be fun. So anyway, Dennis's contribution to the Christmas gifts for the kids, and I'm talking about, you know, the adult children, is going to be wine and vinegar, maybe, if it turns out good, and maybe cheese. I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what's going to be in that basket, but so it's going to be like a kitchen-y basket or bowl or something. It's going to be a kitchen-y present that includes the wine and vinegar that Dennis made. And so I am making kitchen-y things as well to incorporate into that kitchen-themed project. So I am making oven mitts. I got this as a free pattern that I got, I think, I forget who it was from. I got it off of Ravelry, although, Nitpicks. It was, seemed to be kind of out of print, but they had a link to a PDF, and so this is what I'm making. So this is a felted oven mitt, and so I made one and I felted it and I tested it to make sure that it was gonna work, because I can still see the stitches, and it says when it's no longer stretchy and you can't see the knit stitches, then it's felted enough, but it feels felted. I used I hope I still have my thing. I used Spinaway Farm yarn. This is yarn that I bought the first time I went to Maryland Sheep and Wool. And I went crazy and bought all this stuff. And this yarn was one of the things that I bought. And I just kind of cleaned up my area, and I think I cleaned up I had a big, oh, there it is. So this is what it looks like in the skein. It was one giant skein of yarn, 19.5 ounces, and it's from Spinaway Farm, and it was just called 100% wool. And giant skein yarn, approximately 840 yards. And 840 yards is a little bit of a strange amount for me because it's not enough for me to make a sweater. So I had this giant thing of yarn, like, what the heck am I going to do with it? And turns out it felt lovely, and I'm making pot holders. So I'm making pot holders for the kids. I started knitting this and thought, oh, this is really beautiful. Maybe I should make a sweater. But I didn't have quite enough, and I would have had to do 2 colors, and you know. And I'm like, I need yarn for this. I've had this yarn for 3 years at least, not done anything with it. Let me just use it since it works. So, I have one done and one very close to being ready to be felted. I had to leave in the middle of the thumb. But this yarn is, I'm not sure what weight it is. It may be worsted. I think it's probably worsted. I'm holding it double. So it's a nice thick yarn, fabric to start with, and then when you felt it, it's super, super fab, you know, fat. So I tested this. I had a boiling pot of water, and I'm putting my hand next to it, and it worked great. So I'm confident that this is going to work. So I'm doing, for each of the kids, I'm doing 2 of these. And last year I had thought I was going to make everybody aprons. I'm not sure why. I bought the fabric and everything for it, and it's a blue. It's kind of a denim-y color. So I will be making aprons this year for them to go in these packages. And I'm going to be, and I'm going to make Isabel an apron too that fits her. She tried to help Dappy with Thanksgiving dinner, and she didn't have an apron. She tried to put the apron on. It didn't work. By the time we got the apron organized, she was like, forget it. I'll do this. You know, oh, never mind, Nana, I'll do this. So I want to make her an apron. I actually want to make her 2 aprons. I'm going to make her an apron. I have some Thomas the Tank fabric that I bought a while ago that I will make an apron to go with her parents' aprons, which are going to be blue. So the whole theme of that basket is going to be blue. And then I'm going to make her a second apron. I'm going to make her and Dennis both aprons. I have this Peppa Pig fabric. I'm going to make Dennis a Peppa Pig apron, and I'm going to make Isabel a Peppa Pig apron too. And those will be to stay at our house because they cook together sometimes, and it'll be good for her to use when she paints and things like that. So I'm going to be making Isabel 2 aprons, and I'm going to be making Dennis an apron. And he doesn't know he's getting an apron. We don't exchange gifts, so he'll be surprised. But they're both getting a Peppa Pig apron, I decided. So that's what I'm doing for Christmas. I'm going to be making aprons. But meanwhile, my knitting, and these went really fast. This was one day's knitting. I knit this, and then I threw it in the washer with a load of towels and ran it through the whole thing, and it turned out perfect. And while, you know, I didn't want to get too far before I knew it was going to work, but I just kept knitting. So, I wasn't doing anything else. I was just knitting. It was one of those zombie days, but they go pretty fast, so that's not going to be a problem. I'm going to be able to finish those. So, let's see. Niece's hats, granddaughter's hats, Wyatt's hat, antler sweater, Christmas knitting, hot pads, Christmas plan, kitchen theme. Going through my notes. So I am on the lookout for a big bowl or a basket, but I want it to be a basket people use. I mean, I can find a basket that everything will fit in, but then they'll never use that basket. So maybe a big mixing bowl. I don't know. Maybe just a Christmas bag. Because I don't want to get them a basket that they're not going to be able to use. So that's for sure. Anyway, I'm on the lookout for things like that. So a couple of updates before I start talking about my trip. I have closed the thread for the Concordia cowl, capelet, whatever you want to call it. And I don't have mine up here because I haven't worked on it in a while, and I don't have a picture of it. Maybe I'll be good and put a picture here. That's not so easy because I don't have a picture of it. But anyway, the Concordia cowl, I drew a winner. We had 5 people interested in the pattern, and Siri chose post number 4, which is Auntie Nana NZ. Megan, you win. So I will let Sarah Bauer, who is the designer of that and who was so sweet to give me a pattern to give away. I will let her know that you won, Megan. So this will be made in New Zealand. She said she's going to make it out of DK because they don't really have much sport weight in New Zealand. I'm making mine out of DK, and I don't think that's going to be a problem at all. And that she's going to dye it herself, which sounds lovely. And I'll be very interested to see it. So congratulations, Megan. And I'm so sorry that I haven't pulled that earlier because I should have. And there was something else I was going to say. I don't remember what it is. So I will interrupt myself later to tell you what that is if I think of it. It was not in my notes. Okay. I do have a few goodies that I want to show you. I got my yarn from Fully Spun. Now I had shown this yarn before because I had gotten 2 skeins of it, but I realized I wanted to make a sweater out of it. So I sent my 2 skeins back and asked Brooke when she has a new set to send me 3. This one seems a little darker, more blue, so I will definitely be alternating skeins, but I just love this. And this is her company. She has a soul knitting podcast, and her company is called Fully Spun. And this yarn is so beautiful, and what she does, which is unique, is she dyes the roving and then sends it to a mill to be spun, which is why you get the marled yarns and why it looks hand spun and it's not. But it is indie dyed, so I think that's really cool. But I fell in love with this color. This color is called Grab the Old Bay. She is from Maryland, and Old Bay is the spice that you put in crabs. And Maryland crabs are famous, so that's what that reference is. And this is so beautiful. And so I'm excited about that. And I was thinking that I was going to make a featherweight. I even bought the pattern. And I am going to make a featherweight. But I'm I'm rethinking that. It'll be a while before I knit it. But another thing that I got was Metropolitan Knits. And you can see I buy these used, which may be a ripoff to the designers. But I can't. I buy used. Metropolitan Knits Chic Designs for Urban Style by Melissa Wehrle, W-E-H-R-L-E. And this book came, and I'm like, gee, I wonder why I bought this book. And then I came to this sweater, and I'm like, oh, that's right. That's why I bought this book. I bought this book because I have some Cascade Eco bulky yarn, and I really like this pattern, and it uses that yarn, and it was in this book, so I ended up buying the book so I could make this. And I have this color of the eco yarn, and I have kind of a olive green also, and I really liked this, so I think I'm going to make this one. It's called the Magnolia Cafe Cardigan. But when I went through the book, I ended up finding quite a few sweaters that I like. I thought that was pretty. And that is a DK weight sweater. And there are a couple that... This is the cover sweater, which I also really like. And it's got the detail in the sleeves, and the same detail goes down the side of the sweater. But I thought that was very chic. And that is done in a worsted yarn. And I have worsted yarns. I have sweater quantities of worsted yarns. But this is the sweater that I thought, ooh, maybe I'll make that fully spun yarn into this sweater. This is a fingering weight sweater. And this is... I'm pretty sure you put it over your head. These buttons are just for decoration. But this style of sweater, and it says, it's called a surplice. S-U-R-P-L-I-C-E. Surplice silhouettes look great on so many different body types, but sadly they tend to be hard to find in the stores. They lack what those in the industry call hanger appeal. If it looks bad on the hanger, shoppers tend to pass it by, so stores pass on the order. So these kind of drapey things don't look good on the hanger. But I have had several dresses that kind of hang like this, the crisscross, that have been very flattering. And I just really like this sweater. And I think with a cute tank top underneath, I think that will be gorgeous. Don't you think? Anyway, that's what I'm thinking right now. I don't know. But this book has so many sweaters that I like. There's another one, a tunic, that I really like. Tunic seems like a lot of knitting, and this is a worsted weight. Isn't that pretty with that eyelet detail down the side? So, lots of beautiful sweaters. I thought this one was nice too, for a nice cardigan with textured sleeves. I don't know if you can see that. And pockets. I love a pocket. That one's called the Bleecker Street. Oh, and this is the back of the sweater that I want to make. So it's moss stitch, double moss stitch in the back. So I think that will be a gorgeous sweater. So anyway, so I bought this. And it's got lots and lots of beautiful things in it. It also has a couple hats, a couple KALs, a hoodie. This is also nice. It looks a little crochet, doesn't it? Atrium, but this is a lovely summer cardigan. That would look great in cotton yarn. This is in Serena. Manos del Uruguay Serena, which is alpaca and cotton sport weight. I actually have two or three skeins of that yarn. Certainly not enough. That I got on sale at some point. So anyway, lots of beautiful things in that book that I got in the mail while I was gone. So those are the goodies I have to talk about. I'm very excited. I have my Advent yarn. I have two Advents that I'm looking forward to. I got a commercial Advent from Fiber Nymph Dye Works, Lisa, who does the 90% Knitting podcast. I double checked to make sure that it was surprise packages because it's important for me to be surprised, and it was. And it was reasonably priced, and I got it on sale in September. It was discounted if you bought it early, and so I did that. And then, of course, I participated in our Advent swap, and that we did a month or two ago we had set up. And my partner is Helen from the Crafty Toads podcast, who I love. And so I have an Advent from her too. So I'm looking forward to December 1st so I can start opening my Advent. I delivered her Advent to her at Rhinebeck because I was leaving and I wanted to make sure she had it. Which brings me to my Advent for my granddaughter, which did not happen. There are many, many, many good things about podcasting. I have met the most wonderful people. I feel like I'm part of an amazingly lovely community. You guys are the best, and I love you. And it is so wonderful to do this, and I enjoy podcasting. The downside of podcasting is that we all have these ideas. We all have these thoughts. And in a typical life, you would, maybe not even tell anybody. You're just thinking about it, or you might write it in your journal. Or you might tell your husband and he might be listening. And if he is listening, he might remember you said it. And if he does remember, he might, care. But you make these plans and then, nothing comes of it. Like my plan to do an Advent for my granddaughter, Isabel. I wanted to do it. This was my great plan. Last year at Christmas time, I read about the the Yarn Harlot was doing one for her niece, and I thought, oh great, I can do that, and I have a whole year, and I'll have a knit along, the Tiny Things knit along that we're doing. This was to help me do this Advent for my granddaughter. I do not have enough things for an Advent, and I only have 3 more days before December 1st, 2 days before December 1st. And so I did not make an Advent for my granddaughter. And the problem with being a podcaster is I've been talking about this dopey Advent that I ended up not doing for a year. And now it's out there in the internet world. Everybody knows that I didn't do it, and I wanted to, and I didn't. Well, I forgot to bring it up here. But I bought an ornament, a large ornament, actually on the ship we were on. And it's a Christmas tree, and it has 24 little hooks and 24 tiny little ornaments. And, you know, you put it together, and it's just a little tree that sits on the table. So my plan is I am going to wrap all 24 of those little ornaments in a separate little package and put it in a box. And we're going over tomorrow night for dinner, and I'm going to give it to Isabel, and I'm going to tell her, you start on December 1st, which I think is when the elf on the shelf shows up. I'll have to talk to the parents about that. But anyway, December 1st, and you put an ornament, pick one of these ornaments every day, and when you put the last ornament on the tree, that's the day you come to Nana's for Christmas Eve dinner. That's my plan. That is my version of this year's Advent. And I don't know why I'm saying it, but I still want to make an Advent for Isabel and Sammy. And I have lovely contribution. And I'm just, so I'm continuing to plan on making an Advent next year. I'm going to try to be better. And maybe I'll do something a little more active with the Tiny Things knit along, because I think I'm just going to continue that because I still need to knit Tiny Things for that Advent. And try to come up with goals and a plan so that I actually finish it. Because I need to have four little things every month if I'm going to make 2 Advents, one for each of the granddaughters. So I don't need to make one for each of the granddaughters. They could have one together. It could be the family Advent. See, I get over, anyway. I'm working on it, but I'm not giving up. But I'm surrendering now. I don't have a hand knitted Advent for the granddaughters, but I do have an Advent, and I will be tonight and tomorrow morning. I will be making tiny little packages, 24 little tiny packages, and put them in a box with Christmas wrapping on the box, and they'll pick one every day, and they won't be numbered. They'll just pick one every day and put it on the tree, and when they put the last one on the tree, that'll be the day they go to Nana's for dinner. That's my plan. Okay, that's the knitting and future plans. I have other future plans, but we'll talk about those another time. I want to talk about the trip. So if you follow me on Instagram, you will have seen some of these pictures already. I'm going to sit over here. Actually, I'll probably just put the pictures right over my face because they're gorgeous pictures and I don't want them to be tiny. So, and then I can look at my notes. You won't know it because there'll be a picture over my face. So the trip was to Egypt, Jordan, and Israel. And we were gone for 16 days. And for some reason, this was, and the tour company is Grand Circle Travel. Grand Circle Cruise Lines, maybe, because it involved a ship. And we have done, this is our 5th trip we've done with these people, and we have 2 more in the planning stages. We really like them. They're very well organized. But one of the things that they do is they're very interested in cultural exchange. So often on these trips, you know, when we went to the Amazon in Peru, we went to a school that they sponsor and got to meet the children and the principal, and it was lovely. So there's often, not always, a cultural exchange aspect. We had 2 what they call home-hosted lunches on this trip. One was with a Bedouin family who live in an apartment. So we didn't go to a tent or anything, but we, you know, that are living in Jordan, and had lunch with them and learned about their lives. And we had lunch with a farmer in Egypt. The farming he does is only for his own family. He doesn't sell. He's not a farmer who sells his produce. He drives, he's a captain of a felucca, which is a ship that crosses the Nile back and forth for his day job. But anyway, so this is a company that literally goes for cultural exchange, and that's really interesting to us. And we really like them. So we get information from them all the time. And last February, even they announced this trip, and I was like, I have to go. If something happens in the Middle East and you can't go to Egypt anymore, because Egypt has been on my bucket list forever, and I had kind of crossed it off because of the idea that I probably would never be able to go because of the unrest in the Middle East. So when this company felt like they could take a tour there, I knew that things were settled down enough, and I felt confident in them, because they will cancel if you know, if they don't think they can run a tour safely, they'll cancel, and I know that. So when I saw this trip, I told Dennis, I know we already have a big trip this year, but we're going on this because things could change, and if I miss my chance, I'll be really sad. So I'm not sure why, but I guess they thought that they would have trouble filling up these tours. They didn't realize how much, you know, people had wanted to go to Egypt, I guess. And so as an incentive, they gave a discount on airfare. And the discount was enough to pay for a coach airfare or to upgrade to business class. So Dennis and I took the opportunity to upgrade to business class because it's a really long flight, and OMG, it makes a huge difference. Now, I want to start this whole story about this trip telling you that I recognize how lucky I am. I know how lucky I am. Dennis and I thank our lucky stars every day, and that is not an exaggeration. Our families are healthy and happy. We were lucky enough to have jobs that, you know, left us well enough off that we could afford to go and do these travels. We're healthy. We're able to do these trips. We know how lucky we are. I know how lucky I am. So I just want you to know that this is not, you know, I do not take this for granted, because I feel so lucky. And I think if everybody lived the life that we're able to live, you know, the world would be a very happy place, because, you know, if everyone was as lucky as we are. And I know it's luck, you know, I mean, I haven't taken that great care of my body, but I can get around. I spent some time with my sister this weekend, and she's got a lot of trouble with walking, and she's only 3 years older than me, and she could never have done this trip because of her inability to walk long distances and do steps and things like that. So it's luck. I get it. We're very lucky, and I just want you to know that I recognize how lucky I am to be able to go on this amazing trip. It blew me away. So anyway, we'll start. So we were able to fly first class. So the first thing that happens is, you know, we're flying to Madrid, and, you know, I get up to use the facilities, and, you know, you get in, you know, the bathrooms on a plane are like a phone booth, you know, they're tiny, you know, so I'm closing the door to the bathroom, and I see this black yarn hooked to my button, and I'm knitting on these hats. I'm like, oh no. So I open the door really quick, and I run out, and I've got the flight attendant running after me. rolling on my yarn. I've been dragging my hat and yarn all the way down the hall. Anyway. So that's how it started. I thought, oh, great. I don't know how this is going to work out. But it was fine. And the flights were lovely and, you know, but they're long. And so we were tired. We were tired when we got there. But we arrived in Tel Aviv. We flew in and out of Tel Aviv. And so we arrived at Tel Aviv and met our trip leader, met other people in our group, and got a little tour around where the hotel was. The hotel was right on the Mediterranean. There was a big street to cross, and then there were lovely beaches along the Mediterranean. Exactly where our hotel was, there were fences, and they were working on the beach, but you go down a block, and there were beautiful beaches. And we weren't going on the beach anyway, so, you know, that was no big deal, but we could walk down there, and it was beautiful. It was so nice. I'll show pictures. I'm showing pictures of the beach on Tel Aviv, in Tel Aviv. So we did that. So while we were in Tel Aviv, we were able to go to, we had the afternoon off from, you know, any schedule. The next day we had the afternoon off. In the morning we did a tour of Jaffa, which is a city just to the south of Tel Aviv. I'll put a picture here of the view of Tel Aviv from Jaffa. And it's a very old city and, you know, lots of history. And and that was a lovely tour. And then we had the afternoon off. So I found a yarn shop. So I went to the yarn shop. We walked to the yarn shop. It was perfect distance for walking from our hotel, as it turned out. So that was nice. The lady in the yarn shop was lovely. But the yarn shop, and I'll show a picture here, the yarn shop, all the yarn was still in the plastic bags. So, I mean, I'm sure she would have let me touch the yarn, any of the yarn. I mean, I was able to see it. It wasn't like all behind the counter or anything. You know, it was all around the whole perimeter of the store, which was very small. Much smaller than this room, in fact. Really small. But I wasn't actually looking for any particular yarn. The only yarn that she had that I recognized the name was Noro. She had a lot of Noro. But a lot of the yarns were cotton blends and acrylic blends. You know, it's a warm climate and makes sense. A lot of baby knitting yarns, that kind of stuff. So I didn't end up buying any yarn, but I had broken my needles. I bought a bunch of the Leica circular needles, those right size for making the hats and, you know, that kind of thing. And I broke one of those needles sitting on my knitting bag in my travels. So I replaced that needle with the carbons. She had carbons. And I bought some buttons. And that was it. I didn't buy any yarn. But she was lovely, and she would have been happy to show me yarn, I'm sure. In fact, there was another woman there, and she was taking yarn out for her, and they were deciding how to, you know, they were making a baby sweater. A lot of the yarns were for baby wear, I think. But anyway, so that's what we did in Tel Aviv. We walked on the beach, we ate, you know, and we had this little tour of Jaffa. And the next day, we drove from Tel Aviv to Jordan through the West Bank. So we heard a lot about the history, you know, and this is all from the Israeli side. We had an Israeli tour director while we were in Israel, and we had a Jordanian tour director while we were in Jordan and Egypt. So we were hearing sort of the Israeli point of view about everything that was going on. And so we drove across the West Bank, and I have pictures of the West Bank. And we got to the border crossing with, we were going from Israel to Jordan, but since we were going through the West Bank, there's like a no man's land between the West Bank that Israel controls and the Jordanian border. And so our tour director could take us to the border of Israel and get us out of Israel, but he had to stop there. He couldn't go into Jordan. And so then we were on our own on a bus through no man's land, and then we went through the Jordanian border crossing, and then we were in Jordan, and we were with our Jordanian tour director. So that was kind of tense. You know, that was sort of the most iffy part of the trip, was that transition at the West Bank. But that trip from Tel Aviv to Jordan was 2 hours, an hour and a half. I mean, so Israel is a tiny country. It's the size of New Jersey. And you can drive across it. As Joel said at one point, it's only 9 miles wide. I mean, it's a small place. So that was interesting to me. Well, I knew that because once we were getting close to leaving on the trip, I actually looked at the globe. Thought, these are all small countries. Well, Egypt's bigger. So anyway, so we were only with Joel for a day and a half at the beginning of the trip, but we end our trip in Israel, so we meet him again. So we went to Jordan, and our guide there was Ibrahim, and he was a lovely man. He was a Bedouin, and we went with him to the Movenpick Dead Sea Spa and Resort and Spa. And Movenpick, I had heard the name, but I didn't know what it was because Movenpick is the sponsor of a Tour de France team. So once I started watching the Tour de France during Tour de Fleece, I had heard of Movenpick, but I didn't know. It's a hotel chain. And this was a beautiful resort that we were on, right on the Dead Sea. And I'll put some pictures here of, the walk down. They had one of those infinity pools that overlooked the Dead Sea. It was beautiful. We did not go in the pool, but we did go in the Dead Sea. We brought our suits just because we wanted to float in the Dead Sea. Now, the Dead Sea is the lowest point on Earth. It's well below sea level. And it's a sea with no outlet. The Jordan River flows into the Dead Sea, and there's no outlet. And it's a desert, so it's a lot of evaporation. So it is like the saltiest place on Earth. It's dead because nothing can live in it. And it's super salty, which means that you really float really easily. So that was kind of interesting. I'm floating, and Dennis said, "Put your head back. It's like having a pillow under your head." And it was. It was really interesting. And if you tried to sort of sit up, it was hard to keep your feet under you because the buoyancy from the salt water was really buoyant. So anyway, so we did that. That was fun. And the next day we went to, in the morning, we went to the Jordan River, the River Jordan. And what did we see? Well, for one thing, we saw a tiny river. The River Jordan is very small. It's about 20 feet wide there where we were. And, right across from us was Israel, because this is the border between Jordan and Israel is the Jordan River. And on the Israel side, they had a big something, a building, and lots of people were over there on the Israeli side, and people were being baptized in the Jordan River on their side. Our side was a more rustic, was a wooden pavilion and, steps down to the Jordan and that kind of thing. But it was kind of interesting because we had this view of Israel right there. I mean, so close. So that was interesting. And we went to the place where they believe that John the Baptist baptized Jesus. And so there's no water there. Here, I'll show a picture now of that. But, they do have flash floods and, the water, the river does have more water in it sometimes. But, things are changing. And so I'm sure at one point the Jordan River was bigger than it is now, but it's not very big. I was surprised. Lots of churches around. That's how they decided this is where the baptism happened, because there were some very early churches built right here. And the Christians tend to put churches right on top of the places that they consider holy because Jesus was there. So we found that it was a theme throughout our trip. If they think Jesus was there, boom, there's a church. So we did that in the morning. In the afternoon, we had a tour of Amman with, actually straight from the Jordan River, we went to Amman, which was not that far from our hotel. And we picked up Ibrahim's daughter. She was done from school, and he lives in Amman. So we picked her up, and she was with us on our tour of Amman, and that was a lot of fun. We ended up having lunch at a place where he eats lunch all the time. And Dennis and I ended up sitting with another couple, not with just people from our group. And they were so friendly and welcoming. And, you know, they were like feeding us, you know, from their food till our food came, and, you know, building sandwiches for us with, you know, he built this with, you know, this with a falafel ball and some French fries. And anyway, they were just so lovely. And we sat there and talked to them during lunch, and it made it so nice. They were so welcoming. He was originally from Jerusalem, and she was originally from Libya, I think. And Liberia? I'm not sure. But they were really nice, and it was such a nice lunch to be able to sit and talk to people who live in the city. And he spoke perfect English. Her English was a little, you know, and our Arabic is nothing. We have no Arabic. So that was kind of them to be speak English. I do appreciate when people speak English, because I am an ignorant American and do not know any other languages. I took French and Spanish in high school, but it didn't stick. So that was fun, and we wandered around the city, and they have some ancient ruins and an amphitheater, and I mean, these are very, very old places we went. I mean, just incredibly ancient. And that was so interesting. So interesting. So anyway, Amman was lovely. The people were lovely. We ended up going into the Blue Mosque, and the women all had to put on, you know, kaftani things with a hood. And that was interesting. So we got to speak to some of the women at the mosque, and it was really, really interesting. And then, so the next day, on our way to Petra, we stopped at Mount Nebo, which is reportedly where Moses saw the promised land, but Moses was not allowed to enter the promised land. So this is the view where he stood, and he overlooked the promised land, and we could see Jericho, and we could see Hebron and all kinds of places. But Moses was not allowed to enter the promised land, so we were told. So there were some beautiful mosaics in this compound. Of course, there was a church, and an ancient church, and then, you know, and they built churches on top of churches, you know, because these churches were built like in the 400, you know, AD. And then, you know, in 900 AD, they built another one on top of it. And, you know, so there have been a lot of churches. Around where John the Baptist was, there were 3 churches built on top of each other, which is why they think that's where John the Baptist did his thing. But so they were uncovering beautiful mosaics from earlier churches inside this church at Mount Nebo. So that was fun. And the view was amazing. Then later that day, we drove down to Petra. And I can tell you that of our trip, Jordan was the most surprising and really amazing, wonderful country. We expected Egypt to be amazing, and it was, but we had very high expectations for what we would see in Egypt. We had no idea. I had no idea what to expect from Jordan, and it blew my socks off. We had such a good time. And the people were so welcoming. They were so glad to have us. It was really, really wonderful. So we drove that day from Mount Nebo. We went down to Petra. And Petra, I had known about Petra. I had seen like the one picture of the treasury, which is the famous facade that you see about Petra. Petra was an ancient, it's a canyon. And the inside of it has a 2-kilometer walk through a narrow canyon called the Seek. And I'm putting pictures of the Seek as I'm saying this, I'm sure, because the rock formations were amazing. There were tombs. This was a city of tombs and temples. And it was a huge city of tombs and temples. And only the priests lived there, unless there were, the area was being attacked or invaded, and then everybody came into Petra. But under normal conditions, the aristocracy and the priests lived there, but the regular people did not. But there's a 2-kilometer, narrow, windy canyon to get to Petra. And there were some tombs in the walls along the way in the Sikh. There were carvings. There were all kinds of stuff and beautiful rock formations. And we were there pretty early. So the sun was, coming in at different angles. It was really, really gorgeous. And then we saw the treasury. Now the treasury is the money shot for Petra, because it's a beautiful, and it was sort of like, they wanted to impress whoever came to Petra, to impress on this beautiful, gorgeous temple. It's called the Treasury. And this is where Indiana Jones, the third Indiana Jones movie, was shot. Was at Petra in the temple. So I'm going to have to go back and rewatch that movie. And that was all I knew about Petra. That shot, this picture that I'm showing you right now, this is the Treasury. But it turns out that it's a huge complex. I mean, that day we walked 5 miles, 2 kilometers in, and the rest of it was all the way along. And so these are pictures of the temples and things in Petra. Now we did talk to a Bedouin policeman. I hope I have his picture. It's our Bedouin policeman. And he was very interesting, and, you can see his dress. But he, the Bedouin police force are in charge of patrolling in Petra. So anyway, there were lots of souvenir sellers along the path, but lots and lots of temples and tombs. This was really mostly tombs and the people who, were in charge of those things, the priests and things like that. But I was shocked. I had no idea it was so huge. So it was very, very impressive. And it took 5 miles to walk to the end. And at the end, we had our lunch. And after lunch, I said, I can't walk back by myself. I could have if I had to, but I didn't want to. So we rode donkeys back. So this is me on a donkey. So we rode donkeys back to the Treasury. And then we walked out. We had to walk out the Sikh ourselves. And once we got to the end of the Sikh, there was still another, 1,000 yards to go or something like that. And we rode a horse 1,000 yards. That was included in the price of admission. So we did that. But Petra blew us away. And Jordan blew us away. The people were so welcoming and lovely. And the food was delicious. But we like, ethnic foods. And so the Bedouin food was really good. Lots of chicken and lamb, lots of salads, lots of, things they eat with bread. Hummus. We had hummus every day. We had hummus every single day. And the hummus was so delicious, and it was so smooth. It was like a paste. The hummus we get in the United States is kind of grainy a little bit. This was like a paste, and I loved the way it was seasoned, and we were eating a lot of hummus, and it was delicious. So after Petra, we went to Wadi Rum, and Wadi Rum is a big area of interesting rock formations. We weren't there at the best time to see it in the light because, sunrise and sunset, these rocks are going to be gorgeous. And our timing didn't work for that. But it was still very interesting and beautiful. And these are the 7 Pillars of Wisdom. And that's the name of the book that T.E. Lawrence wrote, from Lawrence of Arabia fame. And this Wadi Rum is where the events that Lawrence of Arabia was involved in took place. And this Wadi Rum is where the movie Lawrence of Arabia was filmed. And it was very interesting. And this place is also where the movie The Martian was filmed. And so after that, they I got pictures of this kind of housing motel kind of thing where they have these pods that are kind of open to the sky, I think, so you can see the stars. I mean, I can imagine at night this is unbelievable with no light pollution and so many stars. But so this was in Wadi Rum. But this is also where we took our camel ride, which was a lot of fun. And it was about a half an hour ride, and it was very interesting, and I enjoyed it a lot. I can't believe it, but I forgot to ask the name of my camel. My donkey's name was Simone. I forgot to tell you that when I showed you the donkey. My donkey was Simone in Petra, but I don't know the name of my camel at Wadi Rum, which is too bad. So from Wadi Rum, we drove to Aqaba, which is the only port city in Jordan, and it's on the Red Sea. So Jordan, Israel comes down, and I don't know what's on the other side of Jordan at that point. Saudi Arabia, maybe? No. Yeah, could be. Anyway, sorry about that. But there's a little tiny space where Jordan is on the Red Sea, and that has one city called Aqaba. And that's where we got on our boat. And our boat was the Clio, and I hope I have a picture of the ship a little bit here. It was a lovely ship. It held 80 passengers, 85 passengers, something like that. So it's a wonderful size. And so there were 4 groups. There were 20 people in my group. I didn't talk about my group at all. There were 20 people in my group. They were all lovely. It was 10 couples. They also sometimes, people go, singles go, but our group had 10 couples, and they were all lovely. I mean, usually there's like one person you don't want to sit next to, but there really wasn't in our group, and that was nice. There were 3 couples that were friends and traveling together, and then the rest of us, and everybody was lovely, and that made it so much nicer. There were a couple of pills in some of the other groups. So there were 4 groups on that ship. And mostly the hotels we stayed at, all the groups were staying at the same hotels. Now, we've been on trips. When we went on our Antarctica trip, we also had 4 groups together on the ship, but we weren't even necessarily in the same hotel with them in the places we went. But on this trip, all the groups were in the same hotels. So we ran into them a little bit, but we didn't really get to know them much until we were on the ship. So we were on the ship for 6 nights, I think. So we sailed so we had dinner on the ship that night, and we sailed during the night and woke up in the harbor in Egypt. So that's not true. We were awake for when we entered, so we got like our first view of Egypt from the Red Sea, which was very cool. We had a balcony, which was nice. And so we sat out on the balcony and had our coffee in the mornings, and we watched Egypt approach, and that was fun. And the first port we stopped at, I'm forgetting its name, we got off the ship, and that's what was our Luxor part, and we went to the airport and flew from from the port to Luxor. Originally, they said we were going to do a day on a bus, but I guess when they did the practice, it turned out to be too long, and they decided not to do that, and they changed it to a flight. Now, it still took us 3 hours to get there because a lot of security. We went through a lot of security. And one of the things that was interesting is they had separate security for men and women. Everybody got patted down, so they had a woman patting us down. So they were very, very tight on security. In this airport, and this has happened to us in other places too, as you walk in the door, there's screening, security screening. Your bags and everything go through security screening. And that's just to be able to get into the airport. And it's a little bit lighter security than when you get on the plane. But so everybody who's even entering the airport goes through the security, and then you go through it again. So lots of security, which is good, you know. And so we flew to Luxor. And so this is so then we got on a bus and we're driving to, I guess we weren't driving to our hotel first. The first thing we did was, so anyway, we went to the Karnak Temple. But on our way to the Karnak Temple was our first view of the Nile, I think, on that part of the trip. But we also passed they had a ancient boulevard that went from the Karnak Temple on one end to the Temple of Luxor on the other end, and it was lined with a gajillion Sphinx statues. It was really cool. I have some pictures of that. And then we went to the Karnak Temple, and you can see going in, those Sphinx go all the way to the temple. And this temple is a temple to Amun, the main god. Later, Amun was combined, I think, a little bit with Ra, who is the sun god. And this is a temple to Amun. And it is amazing. And it has the amazing courtyard with 134 columns. Really, really cool. Very difficult to photograph, but lots of obelisks and carvings. A few places you could still see some of the color because all these things were painted and colorful. They weren't, you know, subdued and stone colored. They were all painted. And this was a really amazing place. This was one of the highlights for Dennis. This is one of the things he wanted to see. Petra and Karnak, I think, were the highest things on his list. And so Karnak Temple was unbelievable. So we spent a few hours there wandering around, taking pictures. We heard a little bit of a, you know, speech about the, we had a local Egyptian guide with us. And he, you know, told us about the different pharaohs, and they had a female pharaoh, Hatshepsut, and then they tried to deny her later, and so they covered up her statues and things like that. They couldn't take him down because this was a temple to the god, but they could, you know, make sure nobody could see him anymore. And they apparently did that, and so those were kind of recovered. And anyway, it was pretty interesting and beautiful and amazing. I mean, just the scope of this, you can see people in these pictures and how big everything is. It was just amazingly grand. And then we went to our hotel, which was the Winter Palace Hotel, which we were really looking forward to. It's a famous old British, you know, from the British days when the British were, you know, colonizing Egypt. And this is supposedly the hotel where Agatha Christie wrote Death on the Nile. And so we were really looking forward to it. And this is where we had our afternoon tea. And it was out on the terrace overlooking the Nile. And actually the sun set over the Nile while we were at tea. It was really amazingly lovely. The tea was disappointing. It was kind of weak. I think they were pouring it too quick. It hadn't had time to steep. But the pies and cakes and tarts and sandwiches were delicious, and it was quite nice. I had actually taken a dress to wear to tea, but it turned out that our luggage, you know, we were only allowed to take a carry-on. We weren't allowed to bring anything else, so I didn't take my dress to Luxor, so I didn't wear my dress to tea, but I wore it. But anyway, the tea was lovely, and the room was lovely. And So we had some time. We took Abraham took us on a little walk around where this hotel was, and it was right actually across the street from the Temple of Luxor. There was a marketplace there, and so we were able to exchange some money, which we did, and see a little bit of Luxor. And after dinner, and I hope I have my picture of my martini in the Royal Lounge. Oh my gosh, so amazing. I mean, it had the sign, you have to, no casual dress or whatever, and we're like, but they're so desperate for tourists these days that they're like, you're fine, go ahead. And Egypt has been closed to tourism for 6 years, and so they were so glad to see us. Oh my gosh, it was amazing how friendly everybody was. Really lovely. So we had a quiet cocktail in the Royal Lounge before dinner, and dinner was good. And that night we strolled down the street and went to the Temple of Luxor at night, and it was beautiful. I mean, you couldn't see the hieroglyphs great and everything because it's, night, but a lot of gorgeous pictures. So I have some pictures of the Temple of Luxor. I think Dennis took these pictures because I'm not sure my camera was getting, I'm not sure who took these pictures. Some of the pictures you're seeing, most of them are my pictures, but some of them were from Dennis. So that was lovely at night. So the next day, next morning, we went to the Valley of the Kings. Now, the Valley of the Kings, was very high on my list because these were the tombs. These were the tombs from the later era. I think they're in the Middle Kingdom, perhaps. Middle dynasties. The early dynasties were the Great Pyramids around Giza. And by the time the middle dynasties were happening, the pharaohs realized that the pyramids were being robbed, and it was too easy for people to figure out where they were buried and take their stuff, and they need that stuff for the afterlife. So they ended up being buried in the Valley of the Kings. And, there was kind of a very large concentration of tombs there, which sounded like it might not be the best idea, but the mountain around it was pyramid shaped, which was very important, and it was away from the Nile, which was also very important because you didn't want the water coming up. And anyway, we saw a few stone sarcophagus. We went into 3 tombs, I think, 3 or 4, and the big tomb, Ramses II, who was like the big king of that, big pharaoh of that era. He lived to be 95 when the life expectancy was like 35, and so he ruled a very long time. So he had a big impact. But apparently there was some damage or some problem with his tomb, and it was not open. But we were very, very lucky because up until like 4 days before we were there, photographs were not allowed in the tombs. In fact, they handed out packets of pictures for us because they had them all ready, because up until 4 days ago, we wouldn't have been able to take pictures. But you were able to buy a special pass for your camera so if you wanted to take pictures. I did not buy that pass for me because I was just taking pictures with my phone, and I wasn't sure, Dennis, you weren't allowed to use a flash, but Dennis has a fancy camera. So he bought the pass. So most of these pictures, all the pictures actually from inside the tombs, Dennis took. Some of them he took with my camera because I wanted to be able to post on Instagram right away, and I needed them to be on my phone for that. But so these pictures were all taken from by Dennis. So I'm a little sketchy on which tomb is which, but I don't know that much about each of the pharaohs, so it probably doesn't really matter to you. But they were really amazing, and The walls were totally covered with hieroglyphics that were colored and painted with, oxides and with precious stones. So the blues came from lapis lazuli sometimes. And I mean, just amazing. Unbelievable. You just walked through and your mouth was open the whole time. It was crazy amazing. And we got some pictures of the walls. We got some explanations from the from our Egyptian guide about sort of what some of the paintings meant. And the people believed that the pharaoh would be on, that the sun was on a ship and it sails through the night and then it sails through the underworld and is reborn again in the day. And so they, thought that the pharaoh would follow that same path. He would go into the underworld and come back and be reborn. And that's why. And he needed all his stuff. He needed his treasures. He needed his grain. He needed his cat. He needed his everything. So it's not all treasures. It's everyday things that the pharaoh is going to need were found in these tombs, which is really interesting. So, really unbelievable. Did not disappoint. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I saw it. And they had it well enough lit that you could take pictures, which was really nice. Because you can't use a flash, because the flash would damage the colors. And anyway, the Valley of the Kings. Unbelievable. But talk about a bleak place. There was not one single thing around there that was green. We did see one bird fly into what looked like might be a nesting place. And we weren't that far from greenery along the Nile, but this was a bleak place. This is the Sahara Desert, and it was bleak. But oh, those tombs were amazing. So then we drove back to this farm I told you about, and I do not have any good pictures of the farm. I do have a picture of the ladies who cooked our lunch, though. And that was his wife, one of his wives, he had two, and his cousin and his, mother-in-law, I'm not sure, who made us lunch. Was delicious. And it was, really interesting. And they basically say, ask us anything. And, they'll answer our questions, which was nice. But the other thing that happened was the son of the mayor of the village where he lives came and thanked us for being interested in the people of Egypt and not just the ancient monuments, and being interested in the culture and Egypt of today and what people were doing. And that was really nice. And it kind of struck me. It's like, yeah, we are interested in the Egypt of today, not just the ancient wonders of Egypt. But this trip into Egypt was pretty much a whirlwind. So this encounter that we had, this lunch we had, was really our only opportunity to interact with the Egyptians. It turns out that they have added a new tour, which is a cruise up the Nile, where you spend a few days in Cairo and Giza, and you spend a few days in Luxor, and then you cruise up the Nile to Aswan and Abu Simbel, and it's a really intense spend time in Egypt trip. And Dennis and I are hoping to take that trip in 2019. They haven't opened up the dates yet for 2019, so we're hoping that we can go to that, because cruising up the Nile is definitely on my bucket list. So if things are still calm and they're still offering that, I'm going to do that if I can. So we had this lovely lunch, and then we took a felucca across the Nile. So we sailed across the Nile for, half an hour, and took us back to the Winter Palace Hotel, where we were able to use the facilities and relax for a few minutes before we had headed back to the airport and flew back to our ship. We had dinner on our ship, and then that night we sailed to another port, and I don't remember the name of that port either. I'm the world's worst travelogue person. Where we drove to Giza. Now, it turns out Giza is a suburb of Cairo, And so we drove for about an hour and a half, and we were a convoy of 4 buses because there were 4 groups on our boat. And this day we had a police escort. We had a policeman in front, you know, and I think mostly to help with traffic and things like that. But Dennis said he thought at the back of our convoy there was a Jeep with a machine gun. But we didn't feel any need for that, and we didn't get one feeling of being nervous or thinking that we were in danger or hostility. There was no hostility. We were driving and people saw us and they were waving and thumbs up and cheering and whatever. They were really glad. It's been really hard for Egypt because they have been kind of closed for 6 years. And so the tourist industry, which was a very big part of their economy, is just starting to come back, and they were really glad to have us. I mean, we were walking around the pyramids, and we had young men who were not selling anything. They were just walking, asked us if we were Americans, and we said yes. And they said, "You're very welcome." And it was so nice. It was really nice. Everyone was so lovely. So anyway, so we drive, you know, sort of the ring road around Cairo, and we come to this, you know, we're driving along, and there are the pyramids. You can see them all out, you know, out the window, and I have a picture of that. I'm hoping I'm showing you that right now. And then we went to this kind of lovely resort, where this is one of the places where Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin and the people who put together the peace treaty in the 70s between Egypt and Israel did it here. Some of it here at this place where we had our lunch, which was very nice, but it was in the shadow of the pyramids, which was crazy. So then we went to the pyramids, and we had the Great Pyramid of Egypt, which is the last remaining of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and it was crazy amazing. It looks like it's steps and little blocks, but it at one time had a granite facade, which made it smoother. But that has all worn off over the ages, because these pyramids were built about 3,000 years ago. No, 3,000 BC. 3,000 BC. 5,000 years ago. So there are 3 pyramids kind of right in a row, and it's the Great Pyramid is the grandfather, the father, and then the grandson. Smaller and smaller. The second one looks as big as the first one, but that's because it's built on higher ground. And you can see at the top of that one, and I hope I have a picture of it, that the little bit of the granite cladding is still on the top of it. And one thing that they found fairly recently at the bottom of the Great Pyramid was a chamber where there was a boat. So this boat is like 3,000 years or more. I'm not sure. Now I'm not sure about my timing. It's 3,000 years ago or 3,000 BC. 2,000 years here and there. What difference does it make, right? I mean, really. So anyway, they found this boat in this huge trench, which Dennis didn't get a good picture of, and I didn't have my camera ticket. But there was this huge trench, and they found a boat all taken apart in pieces. It took them 10 years to put that boat back together. And he has pictures of the rope, which I hope I'm showing you. This rope is ancient rope, and it looks exactly like rope today. I mean, it was crazy. You'd think they would have, updated the way to make rope, but apparently not. Apparently they had it down. Why change a good thing? So they did not use the original rope when they put it together. They used modern rope, but otherwise they put it together. It was this big, long ship, with paddles that the pharaoh was going to need to go across the sky and through the underworld and back again. So they put that together. It's a little strange because they built the museum for the boat right over the pit where the boat was found, which is at the very bottom of the Great Pyramid. So there's like a little museum at the very bottom of the Great Pyramid, which seems a little strange to me. So we went to the viewing place where you can see all three of the pyramids. We got our picture taken. Only 2 of them were in the picture, but there were 1 million people there trying to get their picture taken. It was hard to get your picture taken without other people in your picture. 1 million is a big exaggeration. There weren't 1 million, but there were a lot of people. And then we went to see the Sphinx. And the Sphinx is within walking distance of the Great Pyramid, but the way we went, we ended up taking our bus. And the Sphinx was very interesting. I was a little surprised. It's actually smaller than I expected. It is not small. But for some reason, the way I'd seen the pictures, I expected to be huge and giant, and it was not. And I have a picture with a bird on top of its head. That's a crow. So, I mean, you can see what I mean by that perspective, that it's not super, super giant. I sort of pictured it, you know, kind of on par with the pyramids, and it's not. It's much smaller than that. But it's still amazing. Napoleon's men did not blow the nose off the Sphinx. I don't know if you've still, you know, heard that story, but it's not true. They have writings in the 1300s where people are describing the Sphinx with its nose gone. So I don't know how it lost its nose, but it wasn't Napoleon's people's fault. Or the Americans or Germans or the British. They didn't do it. I don't know who did it, but or how it happened. But it was earlier in its life. So that was kind of cool. And then I have this shot. This is how close Cairo and Giza is to Cairo and Giza are to the Great Pyramids and the Sphinx. It is right there in the suburbs. It is so close. I was really surprised how close it is. But Cairo's a big city. A lot of people live in there. So anyway, so Egypt's attractions were amazing, and the people were so lovely. It was so nice to get to talk to some people and to visit that farm and to meet people. It was so nice, and the people were so friendly and welcoming, and we never for 1 minute felt the least twinge of fear or upsetment at all. It was nice. So then we drove back to the ship and proceeded to sail through the Suez Canal. Now this was our only full-on sailing day, and we sailed the whole day. And they thought we would be getting in line for they do a convoy through the Suez Canal. There were 21 ships in our convoy. And they thought we would be proceeding around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. People were talking about getting a call so that they could be up while we go through the Suez Canal. But it turns out something happened. They got delayed and we didn't leave till like 9 o'clock in the morning. So we were all up to see through the Suez Canal. Now the Suez Canal has no locks. The Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea are at the same level. So there are no locks. It's just a giant channel that was dug so that ships could go through. And they have recently, the latest government of Egypt has actually dug a second channel. So the Suez, for part of it, has 2 channels. There's a big lake in the middle where ships can pass, and there's a second channel where ships can pass. So it's going to be a little more efficient, I guess. And so that was fun. I have a picture of Dennis in his, and I can't remember the name of the Arab scarf, but we got those Arab scarves in Amman, and it was so much fun. So I put that on him. I'm the one who did it. I knew how to do it. And so he's under the bridge. There's one bridge that crosses the Suez Canal, and there's currently one tunnel that goes under the Suez Canal. So it was interesting because as we're sailing north, the right-hand side, which is the Sinai, is barren and, desert. And the left-hand side, which is Egypt, the Sinai's in Egypt too, but, the main body of Egypt is green and has, some trees and things like that. But they are building a few more tunnels under the Suez Canal, and I think probably once they do that, there will be more development on the Sinai side. But they do have ferries that take cars across and things like that. So anyway, we sailed all day through the Suez Canal, and that was really, really cool. We had one guy on our trip, Rex, who was 84 years old, and he had been on 38 trips with this company, and he's been to 162 countries. So I said, hey, Rex, have you gone through the Suez Canal before? He said, oh, yeah, this is my third time. Oh, my God. So he didn't do anything new on this trip, but he was taking his daughter, and she hadn't been. So she was getting everything new. And he loves to travel, so he was happy to travel and happy to take her. His wife doesn't want to travel anymore, so he takes his daughter. But he had been through 3 times, which I thought was pretty amazing. So anyway, so we sailed north and through the Suez Canal and into the Mediterranean, and our Jordanian trip leader left us, and the next morning we pulled into Haifa, and so we were back in Israel, and we hooked up with Joel, who was our Israeli trip leader, and and so we were parked in Haifa for 2 nights, I think. The night we arrived and one more night, because we did some day trips out of Haifa. We went to the Golan Heights. Now, the Golan Heights was taken from Syria by Israel during the Six-Day War in 1967. And unlike other areas like the West Bank, Israel now claims the Golan Heights as part of Israel. They don't claim the West Bank as part of Israel. It's not a disputed territory. It's something. I'm not sure exactly what. But they do claim they have annexed the Golan Heights as part of Israel. And, so whatever happens, their plan is, I don't think, to give it back. It is a high point, and we went up there and we were looking at Syria on the other side. And we could actually see, apparently, Lebanon out the other way. I mean, this is a small country. And we talked to, there's a UN observer mission at the Golan Heights. There's an agreement between Israel and Syria about the no man's land and the territory and whatever. And the UN mission was to just be observers to make sure that whatever that agreement is being held to. So that was very interesting. And there were some very interesting sculptures all along the walk up from the parking lot to the lookouts, and they were art that was made from the shrapnel and the scraps of war that were found in the area, which I thought was really interesting, and I really liked those sculptures. But after we went to the Golan Heights, we had lunch at a kibbutz, which I didn't get any pictures of. I don't know how I managed that. And the people there were very nice. And it was, cafeteria, communal eating, kind of interesting. It's, this is a kibbutz that has been privatized. So it's not the original, socialist, everybody owns everything kind of place anymore. That's how it started. But that kind of ideology is hard to maintain over generations, I guess. And so this is one of the oldest kibbutzes. And they just celebrated their 50th year, I think. Yeah, that would make sense, 1967. So anyway, so we had lunch there, and that was interesting. And then we drove down to the Sea of Galilee. And we went to the Mount of the Beatitudes, which is where Jesus did the Sermon on the Mount. And this is another place where they built a church, exactly where he was. We went to another place, Capernaum or something like that, where Jesus was supposed to have preached in John the Baptist's mother-in-law's house, where the guy, the sick man was put through the roof because they couldn't get close enough, and he was, healed, Anyway, there's a church built over that too. And they did that in the 70s. It was very interesting. But anyway, so we were at the Sea of Galilee, which was quite beautiful. And they had a garden. The church that was there was built by Mussolini's architects. So that was built, the latest version of that church was built fairly recently. Well, 80 years ago. 90. And so that was interesting. I tried to get some good shots of the Sea of Galilee. That was kind of interesting. And they had all the Beatitudes, carved into the walkway as you went to the church. And so we went back and stayed in the boat that night. And the next day we left and went to drove to Jerusalem. But on our way out of town, we went to the Baha'i Gardens. And I didn't even realize it. I mean, I've heard of the Baha'i religion, but when, the Baha'i Gardens, it didn't click with me. But Baha'i is a religion, and it sounded very interesting. It sounded like a very interesting religion. They believe in truth without regard to tradition, which I thought was interesting. So they're very accepting of science. And and I guess their world headquarters is in Haifa. I could be wrong about that, but I think it was. But this garden was so beautiful. It was 9 levels, and the number 9 had some significance to the religion. And it had 9 levels, and so went up this hill. It was really interesting. You couldn't go to all the levels from any one place. You had to go around to get to some of them and go someplace else, different entrances, because they didn't want it to be like a cut-through where people like trying to get up the hill or down the hill, and they just walk through the gardens. But they were open, and they were really beautiful, really lovely, and an amazing view of the Mediterranean and the seaport and everything. Our ship is there, but you can't see it. It's behind the building. And we left over the hill, and we drove to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem was also quite an interesting place. Talk about history. The first place we went was the Mount of Olives, which is outside the city. And I forget what happened on the Mount of Olives. You could probably know your Jesus and your religion better than me. And when you look toward Jerusalem, you can see all these white things are all, this is this giant cemetery, because apparently it had to be buried outside the city walls. And you can see the wall in this picture. Those walls were built by Suleiman the Magnificent. Those were not the original walls of Jerusalem. They're a little further out than the original wall was. But kind of an amazing, and there's the mosque. I can't remember anything. The mosque that's right there that, was built on top of the church, that was built on top of the synagogue, the Temple Mount. The mosque that's on the Temple Mount now, and, is big bone of contention because, this is a sacred place for every religion. It's, so what do you do? Pretty interesting. And that's right next to the Western Wall, which is also called the Wailing Wall. And so we saw it from there, and then drove around a little bit, and we had lunch at the YMCA, which was interesting. The food was delicious. It's a hotel now, I guess, and the food was good, and got some good views from the tower, and it was nice. And went to our hotel. Then we had a little bit of a walking tour. There was a small park near our hotel called the Liberty Bell Park, and they had a replica of the Liberty Bell, which was hilarious, being from the Philadelphia area. And so we had a little walking tour. And so Dennis and I went out to dinner by ourselves that night at a local place that mine was good. His was a little disappointing. He ended up being disappointed in pretty much all his meals by ourselves in Israel, which was too bad. Mine were good, but I don't know. Bad picking, I guess. I'm not sure. So that was nice. We went back. I mean, by this time we're exhausted. We're going to bed at 9 o'clock every night. And the next day we had our walking tour of Old Jerusalem. And this was our really our last full day. And that was quite interesting. We saw the tomb of King David, and we saw the room that's supposedly where the Last Supper was, but it wasn't this room. This room was rebuilt, you know, by the Byzantians, and I don't know when, 1300 something or whatever. I mean, you can see the picture. This is not the room that Jesus had his Last Supper. I'm sorry. It just isn't. It may be in the same place, but that's not the room. It was crazy. So, you know, we walked around the marketplace, and we heard, you know, there were some ancient excavations in Jerusalem. There were columns. We saw a tree growing out of a column that was knocked over. And anyway, lots going on there. We had lunch there, which was good. And then we went to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and as we're walking along, we're finding the Stations of the Cross, which I hadn't really understood what the Stations of the Cross are, but these are the places where events happened while Jesus was carrying the cross. And, you know, he stumbled, or somebody wiped his brow, and, you know, that kind of thing. So as we're walking along in the marketplace, we're going up a hill, you know, the stairs going up, there's stalls along, and every once in a while there'll be a little sign that says, this is the 5th station of the cross, in the middle of the marketplace. It's really, really jarring, I guess, a little bit, and interesting. So, you know, we're climbing the steps, and there's stalls all around to sell us all kinds of things, junk, t-shirts, you know. We get to the top of the steps, and there we are at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Well, it turns out what we have just climbed up was the hill, Calvary, where Jesus was crucified, supposedly. And, you know, you can't see any hill. I mean, you've just walked up a bunch of steps alongside a bunch of, you know, stalls. But, you know, so you go in the church, and they have this little place, which is under kind of an altar, which is in the middle of the church, that they say this is where the cross was. So it's really kind of crazy. There's a church. We're in the middle of a church. And so there was a line for people to kind of kneel where the cross was. We didn't get in that line, but so I have a picture of that. It's very interesting. And then you go down some stairs, and not too far away, there's a slab of marble or some kind of stone that's smooth now, but that's probably just from people, you know, touching it over the millennium. And that's supposedly where Jesus' body was prepared after he died. And then also in the same church, they have a church in the church around the place where they say the tomb was, and there was a line for that, and we didn't go in for that. We didn't go to that. But anyway, all of this real estate that's so important to the Christians is inside this church now. And apparently there's like some big agreement between all the different sects of the Christian churches, you know, the Orthodox and the Catholics, and I don't even know who else, who's in charge of what sections and stuff. It's really kind of crazy. But we found that really interesting, that this whole area is inside a church now, where you would expect it to be an outdoor place. I did. So that was interesting to me. Where Jesus did the Sermon on the Mount near the Sea of Galilee, totally landscaped. Doesn't look anything like what it would have looked like when Jesus was there. Nothing. Everything's been changed. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So Jerusalem was very interesting there. You know, there's the Armenian section and the Muslim section and the Jewish section and the Christian section, and people everywhere in very close quarters. And people were driving, which was crazy. Not much. There weren't that many people driving, I will admit. But when we were going through the gate, we had to get over because there was a car going in the gate. Like, really? Seems like a pedestrian kind of place to me. But people live there, and they've lived there for millennium. So it was very, very interesting. So that night we had our dinner, goodbye dinner with everybody, and we had some interesting conversations, and said goodbye to all the people on our trip. And 3 o'clock that morning, we had a cab take us to the airport, and we were catching 6 o'clock Israel time in the morning. We flew back. We got home many hours later, at about 3:30 Eastern time. So that would have been 10:30 body time, Israel, Tel Aviv time. And an uneventful flight. And we had the most amazing trip. Really wonderful. Really wonderful. So I hope you've enjoyed this little narrative and lots of pictures. I don't know how many pictures I've put up. I went through all the pictures. I think we had about 1,000 pictures between the two of us and our 3 venues for taking pictures. I got it down to 144 pictures, but I'm sure I've cut it down more than that because I can't imagine I've been putting up 144 pictures. But if you have any questions, please ask. I'm sure I've skipped over a bunch of stuff, and I'll be happy to talk about it more and show more pictures because I've got lots. But meanwhile, I think I've talked enough, and I will say goodbye. Thank you so much for watching this podcast, and thank you so much for all the kind comments on Instagram during my trip. It was so much fun, and one of the things that was crazy was how connected I was on the internet. Every hotel had great internet. The bus in Jordan had great internet. I was posting from the bus. It was crazy. They even had a place to charge, chargers by the seats. It was wonderful. We were very connected, and I was really surprised how connected we were. And we had an amazing time. But we're glad to be back. I was ready to come home, and I'm glad to be back in my time zone because this last week has been pretty grueling. So, but thank you so much for your paying attention if you did all the way to the end. And I'm glad to be back and looking forward to getting into a little bit of a routine on the way to Christmas, which, I went to get my hair done today, which is why I'm podcasting. I was thinking I was going to do it tomorrow or the next day, but I got my hair done. I walk in and it's all Christmas decorations. I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, yesterday I was driving back from my mom's and I stopped at the rest stop on the turnpike and listened to Silver Bells. I'm like, okay, it's begun. It's official. So I'm going to be doing some decorating too, since we repainted the living room right before we left and got new carpeting. And so all this stuff is in boxes and stuff, and I think I'm going to put my Christmas decorations up rather than my other stuff and see how that looks before I finish putting the room back together. So anyway, thank you for watching. I'll stop rambling. I will be back in a couple of weeks and back on our regular schedule. And I hope you had a lovely Thanksgiving, and I hope you have a wonderful beginning to the crazy December, and I hope you have lots and lots of time to do the crafting that you love. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.